Not everyone needs to own a string trimmer, but if you do, you might want to consider getting a good one. But what makes a good trimmer? Does it have to be a straight shaft, or is a curved one okay? Does it matter what color the plastics are, or does it need to be from a trusted brand? And if you do get a good one, does that mean you have to take care of it, or can you abuse it like this one was? Even though it's the right color and from a good brand, it would seem that it's not immune to having problems. In today's video, we're going to be looking at this Stihl trimmer, and the problem is that I just got it from a coworker who has made the choice to not tell me what's wrong with it. I guess I've told them on more than one occasion that I don't like knowing what's wrong with stuff before fixing it, so I guess I deserve what I'm getting now. Don't worry, I'm sure it just won't start, but we'll find out here in just a minute. Now, I'm going to try and repair this trimmer, but yours might be a little different, so this might not work on yours. So if things are not working out for you, like in the video, please ask about it. I'll be glad to answer your questions. So here's the deal. Just because your equipment is high-end or commercial grade, it doesn't mean you get to leave it out in the weather or get to leave fuel in it and not use it all year long. Buying a high-end machine just means you're hopefully buying a machine that's been made with higher quality parts, materials, and a design that's been proven to last and perform well. It does not mean it's going to handle abuse and neglect any better than a low-end machine. It'll still develop issues and eventually let you down, but it might take a little bit longer to do so than the cheaper stuff. So having said that, this particular Stihl trimmer is not what I would call a good model. The reason I say that is because it looks exactly like the hated FS38, which for some reason most would agree is not a good model either, but why? Now, is it because it's the low-end model, or is it because it was built by the lowest bidder in a country all the way on the other side of the planet? Now, it really doesn't matter to me. We still need to try to figure out what's wrong with it and fix it, whether it was built here or not. Now, before I do anything, we need to make sure this trimmer is not missing any parts, and if so, we need to make sure they're not needed to start and run the engine. Luckily, it seems like everything is all here, and besides being extremely dirty, it looks to be in really good shape. Now, when this trimmer came to me, there was no fuel in it, so the next step is to put some in the tank, purge the air out of the carb and the lines, and then try starting it. So unfortunately, we found our first issue. After pressing the bulb several times, it's not pulling any fuel from the carb or the fuel tank. That means the carb will not have any fuel to give to the engine, so the chances of it starting is almost zero. But we need to hear this engine at least start and run before we move on. Luckily, it started and ran. Now I have to wonder if it might start and run on its own. Let's see if we can get it to do that again, but this time stay running. So of course we wouldn't get that lucky to get it to start and run, but then again I was prepared for something like this to happen. Now before I continue with this repair, I'm going to clean off what looks like about 3 years worth of dirt from being stored in a barn with no floor. Of course this is completely unnecessary, but then again this is my project and I don't feel like getting my hands covered with this much dirt. Just to let you know, I've tried a lot of cleaning products and this one has been the best one I've ever used, at least up until this point. You never know though, I might find something even better in the future, but if you want to know what cleaner I'm using, just check in the description for the details. So getting back to the trimmer, if you press the purge bulb and you find it difficult to press or there's no fuel getting to it, here's what the issue might be. The first and simplest issue is to confirm that the fuel line might be broken. Now it might be broken on the outside of the fuel tank or it might be broken inside the fuel tank and the brake might be above the fuel level. The next and most likely issue is that there's something wrong inside the carb. There's no need to get into the details, but it's pretty obvious that air or fuel can't make its way through the fuel system. So there is a good reason why I call the bulb a purge bulb and not a primer bulb, and that's because it's helping to purge the air from the lines and carb, which then gets replaced with fuel from the tank. Now the easiest way to fix this whole situation is to just replace the fuel lines, fuel filter, and the carb, basically everything. But for some reason, most find this to be too much work and simply will not do it, and if that's you, I have a easier solution that won't take any extra effort to do. All you have to do is, when you're done using your trimmer and you don't know when the next time you're going to use it, whether that be 3 weeks or 3 months, remove the fuel cap, dump out the fuel, replace the cap, and turn on the trimmer one more time. And in about 1 minute of running, that trimmer is going to stop because it's going to use up all the fuel from the tank and whatever was left in the fuel lines. Now you can try to restart it if you want to, otherwise toss it into your garage or shed and your chances of it starting the next time you need it will be a lot higher than if you just left the fuel in it. Now since this trimmer came to us with no fuel in the tank, we're not able to tell if they had left some in the machine during storage, but the reasons for the carb to not allow any air or fuel to pass through it is very limited. But of course, if you know me or seen any of my videos, I'm always ready to save a few bucks, so I'm going to take off the carb, take it apart, and see if something inside it is not working like it's supposed to. Now the main reason why air or even fuel can't pass through the carb is the metering diaphragm that's become petrified and not making contact with the rocker arm that's underneath it, which will then not allow the needle to open, but sometimes it's not that cut and dry. Now, there's more to it than just making sure the diaphragm is still soft and pliable. Before the fuel ever sees the diaphragm, it has to pass through an inlet screen, and its only job is to save the carb if the fuel filter should happen to come off the line. So the first item I like to check is of course the inlet screen for a buildup of debris that would stop anything from getting past it. But after taking this plate off the carb, we can now see the round inlet screen and you can tell that it doesn't have any sort of buildup on it. After that, I need to check on the condition of the metering diaphragm, which on this style of carb is under the purge bulb section. And after taking this part off the carb, we can now see the underside of the metering diaphragm and also the needle and rocker arm that it pushes against. Now, on first inspection, it would seem that the diaphragm is in perfect condition. However, we need to get it off this plate and also separate it from the gasket to get a better idea of its condition. After carefully removing the diaphragm from this plate, we can now get a better feel for it, and this is when we find out what kind of condition it's really in. So it is definitely pliable, but there's a stiffness to it that might be affecting its ability to work the way it should. And if I had to rate this diaphragm, I'd say it was still usable, but I recommend replacing it because I don't want this carb to have any issues later on. So as you can tell, it's not petrified, but it has lost about 50% of its mobility, so replacing it is a very good idea. But since it's not completely petrified, I'm going to put it into a rejuvenation bath just in the off chance that I can use it in a future project as a backup. But if the diaphragm is more than petrified than this, say 80% or more, it's doubtful that it can be saved. Also, while I'm here, I'm also going to remove the brass jet and make sure it's clear, otherwise I'll have to clear it. But after getting it out of the carb and getting a better look at it, you can see through the opening that's in it, so we don't need to do that and we'll just put it back into the carb. But if you do need to clear it, just make sure you find a small enough wire to pass through the jet and then use some carb cleaner in the opening to get it as clean as possible. Now, I'm also going to remove the plastic limiters on the fuel adjustment screws because it's a lot easier to do it now than later on. After that, I'll then start to put the carb back together along with the new metering diaphragm, of course. Just remember to put the gasket down first. Now, I buy these diaphragms in bulk, so basically in packs of 10, 20, or even more, and the reason why is because it makes each one very inexpensive. Now, of course, more than likely, you are not going to do the same thing, but I don't blame you if you buy a single. However, for twice the price, you'll get several of them. But what are you going to do with the extra ones? Well, if you intend on keeping this trimmer for as long as possible, you're going to more than likely need them sometime in the future. But why is that? I mean, you just replaced the old diaphragm with a new one. Shouldn't it be good for another few years? Not if you keep mistreating it. So what do I mean by that statement? Simple. If you intend on keeping fuel in the system for long periods of time, all the components like the fuel lines and diaphragms will eventually start to be affected by the fuel. So here's a good analogy for you. It's like leaving your TV or monitor on even when you're not home. It'll be on for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and eventually, at some point, it's going to stop working because one or more of the components will eventually fail. Now, before I continue on, I do want to make sure the bulb is going to fill up with some fuel because if it doesn't, it means I'll need to order a new carb, and the reason why is because I don't intend on looking at the carb any more than I need to. Fortunately for us, fuel is now filling the bulb, which is a great sign, and it means our chances of getting this trimmer to start and run is now a lot higher than it was before. So back to the story. Now, if you were to turn that TV or monitor off when not in use, you would definitely extend its lifetime. And it's also the same with fuel in your machines. Gasoline from the pump will affect whatever it touches to some degree, whether that be metal, rubber, or even some plastics. So reducing its time in contact with the fuel system is key in keeping your machine starting and running like it should. So after servicing the carb with a new metering diaphragm, it would now seem that it starts and runs just like it should, and I didn't even need to adjust the fuel screws, which is a huge plus. Now before we start congratulating ourselves, there was one thing that I forgot to check before I started working on this machine, which is the spark arrestor screen. Now for some reason on this particular style of Stihl engine, the screens will get clogged with a lot of carbon and it needs to be checked on a regular basis. This one, however, is not that bad, but it is starting to show signs that it is beginning to build up, so I'm going to get rid of that carbon by using my torch. You don't need to use a torch to do this. You can use carb cleaner or maybe even oven cleaner to break up the carbon. Whatever you choose, just be careful and let it cool down before you install it. Now, whatever you do though, I would not. I repeat, do not get rid of the screen. Its job is to keep sparks from leaving the engine and starting a grass fire. Now, I can't tell you what to do. I can only give you information and my recommendations, but what you do after that is up to you and your own free will. That of course goes the same for my recommendations on how you should treat, care for, or maintain your equipment. You don't have to do anything that I say, and I support any choice that you make whether I agree with it or not. It's your choice, and I respect that you're doing what you want and no one's going to get you to change your mind. So if you want to leave fuel in your machine and leave it outside uncovered all year long, then do it. However, once you have some starting and running issues, don't act surprised. But if you're okay with having to service the machine each and every year or having to replace the carb, then keep doing what you're doing then. Me, on the other hand, I don't like having to service my machine each and every spring. I'd rather just get it out of the shed or garage, put fresh fuel in it, start it up, and get on with my life. But how else can you get around this issue if you don't want to run your equipment dry of fuel at the end of the mowing season? I guess you could always switch over to batteries where you don't have to worry about such things, but I think you know what's going to eventually happen with that option as well. You will then have a different set of problems to deal with, and with a lot less resources and parts at hand to help out, I think you know what I'm going to choose, and it's pretty clear what it is. So my question is, how do you treat your machines, whether high-end or residential grade? Are you taking good care of them, or could you do a better job of it? Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.